tell you a story, boys and girls. Is that all right? All right, have a seat. Is there anybody here that's 7? Oh my goodness, what a coincidence. When I was just about 7 years old, thank you. When I was just about 7 years old, I went to Florida with my grandfather and grandmother. They're in heaven now. I went with them in this beat up old red Phoenix. It was a terrible car, and there was no air conditioning, and my grandparents would not let me roll the window down, and it happened in August, and it was so hot. It was so hot, I think I lost some weight on the way down. It was just so hot. And we went to the beach, and we saw my uncle, and we went to Disney World. But boys and girls, we went to one place. We went to one place, and I had an experience that I will never, ever forget. And I'd like to tell you about that, if that's okay. Would you like to hear about that experience? All right. This is an almost true story. See, before they put Disney World in there was really nothing to do. And all of Central Florida was just a bunch of swampland. And there were snakes, and turtles, and alligators. And somebody came up with the idea to build a park on top of a swamp and charge people to get in. And this person called it Gatorland. He called it Gatorland. And before Disney World opened up to what it is now, well, I'm going to tell you, my grandfather took me to Gatorland. And we went to Gatorland, we stood in line, and behind this screen was a woman. And this woman didn't have a tooth. She didn't have a tooth. And don't do this, but she smoked cigarettes. She put a cigarette in her missing tooth. And she lit it. This is a long time ago when people could smoke inside. She lit it. Whenever she talked, the bottom of her mouth would go like this. And the cigarette would bounce up and down. The cigarette would bounce up and down. She said, "How many you want?" And my grandpa Paul said, "2, please." So we walked in, and the first thing we saw was this section that said snake pit. Oh, I wanted to go in so bad. So I said to my grandpa, "Grandpa, please, 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 can we go into the snake pit?" How many of you know exactly what to say to your grandparents to get exactly what you want? Yes, you do say please. You say it over and over again, don't you, at Melvis? That's right. And I begged him, and so my grandfather took me into the snake pit. And everywhere I looked, there were snakes everywhere. Everywhere I looked, there were snakes everywhere. I grew up here in Indiana. I said, "What in the world is the Great Gatorland Jumperoo?" And so I turned to my grandfather and said again, "Please, please, please, can we see the Great Gatorland Jumperoo?" And my grandpa Paul said yes. So we walked out on this deck. I'm not making this up. We walked out on this deck, and it was painted. It was painted all green and white, and the paint was chipping away. The paint was chipping away, and underneath us we saw this swamp water. It was this brown, mucky swamp water, and it smelled like sulfur. And every once in a while, in the distance, you could see the water kind of moving back and forth. Just kind of moving back and forth. Well, they kept making announcements for the Great Gatorland Jumperoo. And in the middle of this swamp, boys and girls, in the middle of this swamp was a cupola, was this wooden island. It was this wooden island, and before I knew what was happening, this man walked out in this dirty old t-shirt and pants that were 3 sizes too small. And he walked out to the middle of this cupola, and he took a 2x4. He took a 2x4 and he started banging against the side of the wall. Just like that. He started making that banging noise. I had no idea what was going on, but he kept making this banging noise with a 2x4. And then a voice came over the intercom and said, "Now friends, as you know, gators are not too smart, but they do know to come with vibrations. They do know to come with that." And they got everybody to clap along. And I'd like you to clap along with me just like that. Oh, that's very good. We clapped just like that. And before I knew what was happening, the man in the too-tight t-shirt and the ball cap lifted up like this, got out 2 raw chickens from the supermarket. He got out 2 raw chickens and he pointed to a wire, a dirty old wire that was strung right across from him. And one of them, as sure as I'm standing here, was right in front of me, as close as that speaker. There is a wire as close as that speaker as I'm standing here. Well, you'd be good listeners. Shh, you'd be good listeners. Well, that man, he took those raw chickens and he strung one chicken out on the other side, and I was so disappointed because it was far away from my wire. And then he took another chicken and he strung it, and he strung that chicken just as close as as speaker to me. And I saw that raw chicken. And it reminded us again that we had to keep going, and I'd like you to keep going with me. That's right. And Elmer, the man, pointed to the right, far away from me, just about as far as that totem pole over there. Just about as far as that. And this alligator swam far away, and I was so disappointed because I could barely see it. This alligator stood up on its tail, saw that raw chicken, and grabbed that chicken down and sunk into the depths of the swamp. And it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. But then, boys and girls, I thought the show was over, but it was not over. Because Elmer, the big man in the cupola, said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how to tell you this, but off in the distance, I see Scarhead." Scarhead, boys and girls. I'd heard about the legend of Scarhead. Scarhead was so big. Scarhead was such a big gator that his head was caught in a trap, and he just pried it loose and it left a scar across the top of his skull. Well, boys and girls, I saw in the distance, and everybody clapped just like I'd like you to clap now. That's right, and as we were clapping, I looked under me, and a gator at least 20 feet tall, with eyes as big as ping pong balls, swam right underneath me. And I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. I saw this enormous green gator swimming right under me, and it swam right up next to my chicken. Right up next to my raw chicken. We all pounded again. Sure enough, Scarhead opened his horrible jaws. He opened up his jaws, and he leapt up and stood on his tail. He balanced on his tail, grabbed that raw chicken, and sunk to the depths. And I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. The coolest thing I'd ever seen, boys and girls. And I thanked my grandfather profusely. "Thank you, Grandpa, thank you, thank you, thank you." Now the end of this story has a riddle. We got back in that red Phoenix and we started driving back. And on the way back, we saw a red sign. We saw a sign that had 8 sides to it. It had a red sign and it had 4 white letters. My grandfather put on the brake. Can anybody tell me what that sign said? Well, I can't hear you. Huh? What? Oh, okay, I'll stop the story. Thank you very much. We'll get back to music. Thank you.